Welcome to Momentum for Change, Voices of the Missouri Movement. This is a monthly podcast produced by your coalition, and I am your host, Nora Mosby, a member services specialist at the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We hope that you enjoyed this conversation coming to you directly from Voices of the Missouri Movement. Some episodes of Momentum for Change have conversations that include content and descriptions of domestic and sexual violence, which may be alarming or activating for some listeners. Please take care and visit the MOCADSV website or call our office to connect with supportive services. Welcome to a new episode of Momentum for Change. This is your host, Nora Mosby, and we have a great conversation planned for you today. Advocates and survivors know that there are many understandable reasons for why a person who has experienced sexual violence may choose not to report what happened to law enforcement. We also know that even survivors who do choose to report are not guaranteed to receive justice through the criminal legal system. At MOCADSV, we are committed to providing comprehensive options to survivors and are always looking for additional ways to connect survivors with resources that provide empowerment, healing, accountability, and justice. And one of these options is through the civil legal system and the pursuit of compensation through civil litigation. Here to talk about their expertise on this topic is Grant Boyd, an attorney with the O'Brien Law Firm. Grant, thank you so much for joining me today. I certainly appreciate it.
No, thank you. My honor. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. As we're getting started, I just want to recognize that you have been handling these types of cases for many years now. You've got a lot of experience with this legal practice representing survivors of violence. But I'd like to back up just a little bit and get an idea of what your background is and what brought you to this particular legal practice.
So I grew up in St. Louis, went to law school here. I had been placed at an internship in undergrad at a public defender's office in St. Louis. And so my initial experience with the legal system starting in undergrad was working in criminal defense. And that kind of that experience started to build quite a bit. And then I was hired by one of the best criminal defense attorneys and law firms in the state, my second week of law school. And I worked for him for about 10 years, but have been taught by a professor and mentor of mine that I now get to work with, enough about how to help injury victims or do plaintiff's work, just enough to like get myself in trouble. And so when I was doing criminal defense, we weren't really doing crimes of violence really, and definitely no sexual abuse. Because I kind of had a hard line on that because I had done through my internships in doing public defender's work, had come across some cases that had kind of just thrown me for a loop, and I didn't really understand why yet. But it kind of threw me into a really big mental health spiral where all of a sudden I was having a really hard time with that material and coming to terms with those things happening in our society, especially kids being victimized. And so I'd stayed away from it. And after I became an attorney very early on in my career, I think within the first year, I fell backwards into helping 2 child sexual abuse victims. By the time they came to me, they were 12. When they were raped and molested at a neighborhood in-home daycare, they were 8 years old. Wow. And their families had come to us and just said, "Hey, we've been through 4 other law firms. Everyone said there's nothing they can do. Insurance companies denying coverage. No one there seems to be no help in sight. You helped our family with something else. It was a wrongful death case. And would you mind taking a look?" And so I read the therapy notes, read the police report, and met the families. And that really threw me into a spiral, but in not a great one. I could say I really obsessed over everything, but it turned out like coming out of the spiral on the good end instead of just like that depression from being on the criminal defense side of it. And so I found out that, that was really where my passion lied. And okay, like I can keep playing this character of a criminal defense lawyer, or I can start being my true self and being this righteous crime victim advocate and helping victims of sexual abuse, helping victims of domestic violence. And that was where I found like I can go in there and actually be me and believe everything I'm saying and really have all my heart and energy behind all of it and be genuine and then feel good about what I'm doing. And there is through those cases I realized like there's no better feeling than all of a sudden sitting down with a family, whether it be domestic violence or sitting down with a domestic violence victim or a sexual violence victim or survivor and saying, we just changed things for the better. And things, there's going to be a semblance of justice for you. And maybe we just change your life completely. And that is the kind of the thing we're constantly chasing here. So that is how I got started in this work. And then it just slowly kind of snowballed from there.
Please know that I will forever now think of you as a righteous crime victim advocate. So I love that phrasing, and it's definitely something I can relate to. This is my life's work as well. And yes, there is that certain sense of hopelessness and despair when you realize like some of the trauma and hardships that individuals have to go through in life, especially children. But I think there's so much strength and hope giving when you witness that resilience and are part of somebody's healing and seeking justice. So it really goes both ways. And I think many of our listeners can relate to that.
Yeah, I think just that, being a part of the good in the world. And I think in showing people that there's good in the world, especially in such a dark time, that is really something that that is kind of what started driving me. I'm like, if we can provide some light back to these people or some power back to them, then this was all worth it. And who knows where this is going. And a bunch of people told me there's no way you won't be able to make a practice just helping victims of violence. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we'll see. So it took a little bit to finally take the full leap of faith, but finally I was just like, I'm just going to do it. And that's where, I'll trust that I gave it a go. If it blows up in my face and, it doesn't pan out to where I can provide for my family and, then so be it. But at least, I'll know that it was a worthy cause. And luckily it's, been something that people in the community have trusted me with helping them and helping their loved ones. And that it's such a tremendous honor anytime someone asks us to do that or asks me to do that. So, and we've been very lucky to where people have believed in us and let us fight for them. So.
And I think that passion really shows through in your work with survivors. It shows through in your work with the community. From things I've heard about your practice, feedback I've heard has just been really positive. And I love that you use that word authenticity, because that I think it's very apparent in the work that you do. I'd like to talk also about specifically your work with O'Brien Law, what your practice there is as it's evolved over time, and why you think that O'Brien Law and your practice is a really good fit for survivors in particular.
Yeah, it was they approached me in late 2019 when really like when my work on behalf of crime victims had really started like snowballing where all of a sudden, okay, like I have a case load here of helping crime victims, whether it be through order of protection dockets, those, we did a lot of DV work there, a lot of sexual violence cases there, and a lot of child abuse cases there, or helping them understand their crime victims' rights through the criminal investigations as well as a criminal case, because that's something that no one really talked about. And we still encounter people in the criminal justice system that had no idea those even existed. And so that once that kind of started to pick up, the O'Brien law firm, really a mentor of mine, it was that professor in law school who was of counsel there, approached me and said, hey, some people have been watching what you've been doing, and there's a few outfits that want to talk to you. Selfishly, with the O'Brien law firm, they'd really like to pitch you first before you talk to these other crews if you're going to talk to them. Would you be interested? And I'm still close with my old boss from that original criminal defense firm, and he was such and is such an amazing mentor of mine. And I'm a very loyal person where it's tough for me to all of a sudden just say, hey, I'm going to change teams. But it was that law firm was a historic and still is a criminal defense outfit. And that's what it was built for. And we got to the point where it's like, well, we got this, historic criminal defense firm. and then this now coming up crime victim lawyer, like those two things just weren't meshing. And I was losing my ability. And I know it sounds cheesy, but I was literally in court and I can tell that my voice was different when when I was trying to advocate on behalf of our criminal defense clients. And they were still getting unbelievable representation. We weren't pulling any punches, but I could just tell that like the feeling on my end wasn't there. And so I felt like that really wasn't fair to the clients, not fair to the firm, not fair to me. So when I was like, all right, I'll hear you guys out. And they said, hey, listen, we believe in this. We believe it's important work. And if you are interested, we'd like for you to come on, build out a department. You'll run it. We will put, community resources, get you connected, organizations that you want to support. We'll support them. And we will get behind this mission if you will take this leap of faith. And it was tough because I, had a known quantity of like, okay, I know I can do the criminal, here's what my life looks like. And here's what, from a success standpoint, I know what I have right now. And like, if all of a sudden I take this jump and it doesn't go well, like, what do I do from there? And so they were just fantastic. I mean, of course the COVID shutdown happens right after, like 2 months after I agreed to
Oh no.
over, because I was like, I need 3 or 4 months to phase out of my old firm because I was involved with so much there. It's like, if I just say, hey, here's a 2-week notice and drop a smoke bomb, it would leave them in the lurch, and it would be really unfair to the firm, to the clients, everybody. So the plan was 4 months, and, month right dead center is when the shutdown hits. So like the last 2 months of my old firm, it's a ghost town. No one's in the office. I'm the only one there. There's no one on the streets.
Right.
And then the first, year and change at the new firm, same thing. It's like driving, there's no one on the highways. There's no one in the office. We eventually shifted purely remote. And so it was weird. And it took a while to really get it up and running, but they just, they've been unbelievable and just giving me almost complete autonomy to pursue this the way I want to pursue it and follow my heart, and just an unbelievable amount of trust in the process and trust in the product, that it would work out, and including, a lot of the pro bono work we do on behalf of domestic violence victims and sexual violence victims through the order of protection process, helping them understand their crime victims' rights or advocate for their crime victim rights, and knowing that we're not going to get any money. There's no money coming from that. And they knew that type of representation was really important to me, and that I was a true believer in it. So I think there's probably a lot of firms that are like, hey, if you want to spend that much time doing stuff for free, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But they were just completely behind it. And that's where I kind of realized that this is home.
Yeah.
So, and it's, we've built our team up, and the team continues to grow. And as people, invest in this philosophy and this idea and these values, and it's been really cool to see.
Yes, and very cool to hear about. I'm wondering, as you're talking about your background in criminal defense, that's pretty different than civil litigation on behalf of survivors. And I know that kind of work led you to your true calling, which is to support survivors. But is there anything about doing that criminal defense work that gave you insight or informs any of your work on supporting survivors?
Yeah, I think from the obvious, like obviously, like you get the playbook, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I know the where the attack's coming from and what attacks to expect, and or what, that's from an adversarial standpoint, it helps in that sense. From a process standpoint, it also helps because there can be so much trauma that comes through just the legal system, right?
Mhm.
Just the process of the legal system, the fear of the unknowns, the length of time, that I don't have anybody to answer my questions. I don't feel like I'm getting responses. What the hell is going on? And so knowing so intimately those details, hey, here's what's going to happen next. Oh, CaseNet says that this is happening. I don't even need to pull anything up. I'll tell you exactly what's going on. Here's what to expect. Here's what's coming next. Here's what for a hearing like this on a bond reduction. Here's how you should prepare yourself. Here's what we're going to work on. Here's what you're going to hear. Here's what the other side's going to say. And giving people the weapon of knowledge helps prepare people, and it helps quell those anxieties to where all of a sudden it's not, they don't show up like scared. of the process. They now feel like they know what's going on. They get it. Okay, yeah, it's not like on TV where all of a sudden someone's arrested and 2 weeks later they're going to trial. This is going to be a process, and it's not anyone, there's no malice involved with it usually. This is just how things work. And like I said, helping arm people with knowledge, is a big byproduct of that criminal defense background. But really, like, I guess how I was talking to a group today that is focused on public interest work, and they were asking me, like, how do you get from being a public defender intern and being passionate about that to getting to be a crime victim attorney, and that being like, connect those two dots. And I was
Yeah.
like, I can do, that's easy. So, and I think really where it was like, when I was helping public defender clients, a lot of those were people that had been discounted by everybody, that maybe no one had ever helped before, that just needed help. They needed, how do we correct the trajectory a little bit? And how do we make sure that this doesn't ruin your life? To the extent we can, like, right. And there were a lot of people that just needed that kind of help that weren't bad people. All right. They're really good. They're just really down on their luck and just, coming to you hat in hand, like, no one wants to help and I'm lost. And so helping those people that were in those situations, that was something I was really passionate about. So I'm like, they're deserving of help, to the extent that they've had a bad string of luck, and not endorsing anything that they did, obviously, like for people that actually committed crimes. But if we can help these people correct course and help correct the trajectory and spend time doing that, because it's perhaps the right thing to do, not only for them, but to better society, then that's where my passion is. And so then taking that and be like, well, how can we start helping people that deserve our help? These crime victims, these sexual abuse victims, these domestic violence victims, these kids and their families who all of a sudden the course has gone off path and gone in a bad direction. How do we course correct? And how do we change the trajectory of their life to make it a positive? And so, and that's, it was a lot, I found it, doing victim work eventually forced me to confront some stuff from my past that I buried down, and not wanted to confront. But that was when I really found that, like, this is something that I can always get behind and believe in, and that it's so important. So that's, from a philosophical standpoint, how those two dots got connected with criminal defense, at least part of my experience in criminal defense, and then crime victim work.
That's fascinating. So interesting. Your words bring to mind a quote from civil rights attorney Brian Stevenson, who says, people are not the worst things that they've ever done, which reminds me of something that we often say in the advocacy movement when we're supporting survivors, and really encouraging people not to define people and individuals by the worst thing that ever happened to them. So people are complex. They have complex lives. And recognizing that totality of people's experience, I think is good for public safety. It's good for everyone involved. Absolutely. And on many different levels. So I love that you spoke to that. As you're speaking about course correction and seeking justice, can you tell us just the nuts and bolts of civil litigation on behalf of survivors of sexual abuse? What does that look like?
Yeah. So there's it's a complex answer. But I think that there is here. Well, I'll tell you what it is and what it isn't. Okay. I think there's sometimes a common fear that we're confronted with. Well, if I pursue this, is my name going to be public? Is this is such a personal matter to me. It's so, like, I don't know that I'm ready for the world to know forever out there in the public sphere, because of public court records, that these horrible things happen to me. And so the thing is, like, we are able to keep people's identity private, in almost every circumstance. And so that kind of peace of mind that, hey, like, we can pursue this. You don't have to worry about this being out there, that everyone's going to know for all time that these things happen to you. But it's also, like, not necessarily having to file a lawsuit. There are ways to get justice in the civil realm for victims. and survivors that don't entail us filing a lawsuit. We explore pre-lawsuit resolutions and successfully a lot of the time. And so usually if we're filing a lawsuit, that means that either one, we don't have enough time to explore pre-suit resolution, or two, like we don't believe that the other side's giving you enough justice to warrant any further conversation pre-suit. So, you know, once we file a lawsuit, it's kind of the same, like talking about that process of a criminal case where we sit down like, hey, here's what to expect at any point along this timeline, a rough timeline. The case could resolve or it could go away. Anytime you want to walk away because that's the right thing for you in this moment, um, you are allowed to do that. You're in control. And so helping people understand, like, I think a big fear with attorneys and members of the bar have created this problem is people look at attorneys like power and control freaks. And we're always very, when we initially talk with clients and meet with them, I'm very clear. I'm like, you are not, my job is not to control your life or make your decisions for you unless you want me to. My job truly, and most attorneys won't tell you this, but on the genuineness and transparency front, my job is to lay out every single option I can think of for you and tell you the pros and cons of each option and what I think you should do. You can say, hey, Grant, thanks for the 10 options and your advice to take option 2, go screw yourself. I'm going to take 4 and 5. And it's my job to go execute. And so helping people understand, like, this is your voice, your power. You're the one making this. I'm just your fighter out there. And so that is one of the big components of the process that I think can't be understated. And but then going back to civil litigation, that it's this, there are parts that are done in writing. There are parts that are done in person. Usually we're able to keep the clients insulated from a lot of it because it's mostly us having to do work versus, them having to go speak preach their case or plead their case with anyone. And that's another component, like making sure we're doing everything we can to avoid the potentials for re-traumatization. Like we usually tell clients, like, we're going to do everything we can to avoid you, unless you want to, avoid you having to go tell strangers your story more times than you need to. Or ideally, the ideal world is you don't have to tell your story against your will at any point, period. So, but then making sure that they're prepared for that moment and having a team around them that supports them. So, and then it's not this cold, hard, emotionless system of like, hey, you only call me if you got a legal question. It's, hey, all of a sudden this starts, something kicks up, some emotion, something happened in your life and it's kicking this up. Give us a call. Like, we're not, I don't by any means pretend to substitute for mental health professionals, but, as it pertains to the processes that we're involved in, we want to be there to help you navigate the emotions that come with this stuff. And then when make sure that you have the people in a mental health standpoint or in your support system that are helpful in that sense. So, the civil justice system is complicated. It can be a lot of involvement and go all the way up to trial. And sometimes that process takes anywhere from a year to, we had a case that we litigated for 5 years before it was about to go to trial. And it wasn't like we were sitting on our hands. I mean, we were doing stuff all the time on it. And so, but it's, but that's on the far end of the bell curve. So a lot of cases we're, usually looking at some kind of knowing where it's headed within 12 to 18 months and sometimes much less, sometimes a little bit more. But I think a lot about what we do is preparing clients, their family members to understand the process, setting those expectations, weaponizing them with knowledge. And that I think helps calm some of those fears and misconceptions that have been created about participating in the civil justice system for victims of violence.
So I think this idea of pre-lawsuit resolution is really interesting because it sounds like with your representation, you're giving survivors some leverage in a case without even having to file a lawsuit. Do you have any examples of kind of what those cases might look like, or any success you've had with that kind of pre-lawsuit resolution that maybe wouldn't take quite so long or be such a long process?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I would like to say the overwhelming majority of our cases we're able to resolve pretty soon. And that's not us taking discounts.
Mhm.
That's us on our end putting time in and effort in to learn the facts, investigate the facts, and build the case. So, like, our philosophy is, well, as long as we have time to do it, that we're showing up to the other side with a totally loaded up arsenal. And here's the picture. Door number one is this. Door number two is there's going to be a lawsuit filed against you. You make the decision. And so that, I think, is the big component that leads to successful pre-suit resolution that doesn't put the survivor through more, or
Mhm.
the victim's family or the victim through more.
Mhm.
And really knowing how to do that and when the right time to do it is a big component, because it doesn't always work, right? Like, or it's every case isn't the right case to do that on. But making sure you know how to do it effectively, where you're getting justice for someone. That's a big component. And again, the beauty of it is you avoid any potential for re-traumatization through litigation. Not, and I think it's one of those things that gets built up. And I'm the best at giving this advice, the worst at taking it personally. Because, like, if I have something, I sit and worry on it and I ruminate on it, and it's always like that worst case scenario that you built up in your head, like, it never comes up, right?
Yeah.
It's never as bad as you think it's going to be. But that can happen a lot with this. You're like, oh my God, are they going to ask me about my entire history? Are they going to ask me? Are they going to dig up this little stuff? What are they going to do to call me a liar? What if they don't believe me? All these questions start to get this worry wheel spinning. It can spin really fast, and so spending time preparing and helping navigate that is, I think, a big component of it. And so to make sure that you take some of the fear out of the system and some of the misconceptions that are very common out of the system.
So what you're doing, it's a job, it's a legal practice. Um, but as you're speaking about your approach, it's very clear that this is value-driven work to you. And so could you talk about some of those values and why you care so deeply about doing this work?
Yeah. So I don't, I don't know. It's a tough question because there's so many, like, things that come to mind.
Mhm.
Uh, it's just a cause that I end up believing in. I think, from a personal standpoint, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and it took me until I was 29, I think, in a private therapy session to admit that hey, I was sexually abused as a child, to my therapist.
Mhm.
It took me 2 more years to tell my now wife. It took me, I think, another 2 years to tell a couple trusted colleagues in the legal profession that do this kind of work, just because it came up in a setting where we had a bunch of child sexual abuse advocates having a conversation. And it took me, I think, a couple more years after that to, at a split-second decision in front of the Missouri legislature, to say it publicly for the first time. But I still haven't found the ability to tell the story and tell the details out in the open. And I don't know what it is. But it's important to me that I make sure that I'm helping other people find that voice, and that, there are this is some of the most horrific stuff people can go through, sexual violence and domestic violence. And it's one of those things, you see it on the news or you hear about it, and you're like, well, yeah, that happens, but it would never happen to me, or it never happened to somebody I love. We don't realize how prevalent it is, and what just a lasting impact it can have.
Mhm.
So, if I realized I could either do work that um, it's a lot of on to the next one, you don't really feel, I wouldn't say you don't feel that great about it,
Mhm.
or at least I didn't. Or I could do work where I feel like I'm making the community better. And
Mhm.
I'm maybe, am I going to stop sexual violence and domestic violence and child abuse? No. But what I saw was, like, if I'm going to invest my energy in something and trying to stop, if I can start to like bend that curve down even a little bit, and then get other people motivated to do the same and other people to be vigilant,
Mhm.
then that means that the world is getting, not to sound cheesy, but the world is becoming a better place. And so you know, eh, it's just kind of like a truth, justice, American way type thing where it's, it's something that I believe is important and that these people are deserving
Yeah.
of our help.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just, it's a personal connection to it. It's a really like dangerous sense of empathy. And so, I was again talking to that law school group today, like, how do you deal with burnout? I'm like, that's a great question. Oh, I wish, I remember when people would ask it when I was in law school. Um, and it is like, I'm a big believer, like you have to become emotionally invested in this stuff.
Yeah.
And it has like, you have to be passionate about it and anything you do. Right. But with that, they teach them also like, don't become emotionally invested in your cases or emotionally connected. And it is, but I'm a big believer, like to give it 110%, which is what, especially with this kind of work, you have like, that is what people deserve. And
Yes.
if you're not doing that, that's a problem. And so, but there's like a 0.1% of society that cannot be emotionally invested and still get 110% and just like total sociopaths. But, it's with that comes the danger of like, hey, like, the other night I went home and a case just, it can snap you, a fact pattern can snap you out of your reality and place you into theirs. But it's I was in a case the other day where I was talking to, who was sexually abused that had special needs. She's adult age, but, um, you know, intellectually a child, and she was coloring. Um, and she was telling me about all the colors, and all of a sudden, like in that moment, I was like snapped into like, I'm having a conversation. Like this reminds me of a conversation with my 3-year-old, and it just broke my heart. And I went home and cried my eyes out. And so, and it's, another case the other day, same thing. It just snapped me. I wasn't in the case. I was living the nightmare. And, it can, that level of empathy can be very dangerous, but it's also very empowering. And if you can channel that and let it motivate you, that will give people what they deserve.
Yeah.
And, and that's how, from a value, I don't know. Yeah. Well, the question.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
but, and that's the tough part.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much about what you said that just struck a chord with me, and I appreciate you speaking to. Um, Thank you for speaking openly and publicly about your experience with abuse. I think that does just break the isolation that so many other survivors are experiencing. It breaks the silence. Um, and I think that is what is going to eventually end domestic and sexual violence and child sexual abuse is survivors speaking out about their
Yeah.
experiences. And it isn't the details. If there's anything that the Me Too movement taught us, it's that it's the solidarity. It's the saying that this happened to you, this happened to me too, and we're gonna do what we
Yeah.
can to make it right again. Right?
It's like that predator psychology. You prey on the ability to maintain silence
Hmm.
and make someone feel like, guilt, shame, isolation, fear,
Yeah.
alone, and embarrassed. And so, and that all preys on the idea, like if I can keep this isolated and contained, I get to exact my will on this person, continue to abuse them, continue to,
Yeah.
inflict violence. And so having people, we have seen, I think sometimes it can be disheartening because domestic violence and sexual violence is talked about so much now, but really what that's doing is it's helping people, like I said, find their voice. It's helping us get the laws changed to be up with the times. It's helping us more people be held accountable. It's helping institutions that were supposed to be doing better now be better because we're able to now hold them accountable.
Hmm.
Uh, and that again, that creates vigilance. It's easy for us to find the dog that bit somebody. That's easy. I want to know who let that dog off the leash and why. And
Hmm.
so if we can get, it's the scary thing about this work is you're confronted with the reality of it, there being true evil in the world.
Hmm.
And it's, how do you abuse a kid? How do you commit acts of sexual violence? How do you commit these horrible acts of domestic violence? And, you realize, people are getting publicly skewered left, right, social media, online forever for engaging in these acts against our fellow citizens and our fellow human beings. But people still do it.
Mhm.
Even though we know, like, you're the guy just, across town got absolutely lit up online and in the media for abusing kids or, abusing women or committing acts of sexual violence. You would think that people out there who are doing those things were like, oh, but God, I probably shouldn't do this. But they just can't stop themselves. And so you're faced, like I said, with that, like, okay, do I try to, as much as I love to rip pure evil out of the world, if I can get people to recognize and act on pure evil and point it out and report it, like that will help stop it. And so, the big, I think it is one of those things like you see with more and more people coming out, especially, celebrities and prominent athletes and prominent people in pop culture, musicians, artists saying like, hey, that I've been through horrible things and here that like helps people speak. Like I'm not, wow, it's look at all these successful people and all these people who, are famous people, or, my friends or people I know that have been through this. I'm not alone.
Mhm.
And, it's okay to talk about it. And I should, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to find power in. And, so yeah, I think that such a, that's something I kind of realized I needed to do. Um, is to finally come to terms because there were so many people that were coming to me. They're like, well, you just don't understand. I know you don't understand, but here's how I'm feeling. Or I know you might not understand this, but this is what we went through, and it's tough. It might be tough for you to understand how I'm feeling, but I'm like, I get it, and
Mhm.
like, but I didn't want to say it,
Mhm.
but like, or like, hey, it's how do I'm never going to be a successful so and so because you probably weren't abused. So like, now my life's, and I'm like, okay, let's just get this out there.
Mhm.
I think people need to hear it and need to know they're not alone. And that also like, yeah, you don't have to feel ashamed to tell them the story.
Mhm.
Um, so
And I think it definitely lends that authenticity that we were talking about earlier. Um, yeah, and so I'm just so glad that you are there and doing what you're doing because hopefully it will kind of bring about some accountability or recognition that these things could not happen and should not happen potentially by perpetrators, but if not by perpetrators, maybe the institutions who are active participants or played some role in not protecting children and not stopping this from happening. So my understanding is that often with civil litigation, you're not necessarily suing or going after somebody who committed the crimes, but those institutions. So, can you talk about some of those cases and maybe what cases you would consider taking in O'Brien law? Because I can imagine you aren't able to take every single case that comes across your path. So, what are some of the cases
yeah,
that you've had some success with
yeah. So
in
we
general?
do a
Sure.
lot of, oh yeah, that's right. We do a lot of cases against like educational institutions,
Mhm.
um, and then private institutions as well. So, but I'd say that's a big bulk of the practice, as well as businesses that weren't doing enough to businesses, daycares, whatever, they weren't doing enough to make it safe, the premises safe, or weren't doing enough to supervise people, or knew that somebody was dangerous and they were letting him still come around. Um, but we also look at situations where there are also other people that were supposed to be saying watching a perpetrator or watching a child who was victimized and they didn't do it. And sometimes those are cases against private citizens, but we're able to find sources, insurance policies that might apply that can help compensate the victim because, you know, the cruel part of the world is that a lot of people that inflict this harm directly upon survivors and victims, they don't have much money to take. And even when they do have a bunch, it's like, come pry it from my cold dead hands,
Mhm.
which we're willing to do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we go after abusers all the time, but a lot of the work is focusing on those institutions. Like I said, school districts, daycares, businesses. I'm trying to, we have massage parlors. And so those are I'd say the bulk of our caseload, these boarding schools and these troubled teen industry facilities. Um, residential behavioral health facilities where there's abuse going on, because there's a lot of patient, either there are a lot of people being abused in that context too. So um, it seems to know no bounds.
So if somebody's listening to this episode and they're like, "Wow, this Grant Boyd fellow, what a great attorney. He understands trauma and practices trauma-informed representation." I wonder if you could take my case. Like, what kinds of suggestions or recommendations would you have around the parameters of who should get in touch with you about potential representation?
I would say anybody who's been the victim of violence, or a family member whose loved one has been the victim of violence, reach out. It's
Mhm.
I always hesitate to say, well, here's the only stuff we take, or only call if this, because I think it's important to just talk to someone who understands, but also like understand like, hey, yeah, we can't, you're right. We can't take every single case. All right. Um, I like got in when I first started doing I was yes to everybody. Right. Like,
I can
but
see
it is
that.
like, yeah. And just because I couldn't help myself, because I just wanted to help everybody. And you get these cases where it just rips at your heartstrings. You're like, there has to be something that can be done. But I wish I had some kind of matrix to say like, hey, here's as long as you hit these 10 factors, we'll take your case. But there are cases, all kind, like, until we hear about it, the exact fact pattern and the exact situation, like, I don't know. But that's why I think it's so important to pick up the phone. But also, we can, at the very least, we can sit with you and say like, hey, we can't do a civil case for you, but let's talk about the other options available to you. Let's talk about what to, helping you get in contact with law enforcement, helping you feel empowered with the criminal justice system, helping you be prepared for that, spending time to, maybe we help you with an order of protection. Um, or maybe we just provide you information to where it just, you feel heard and you feel knowledgeable, and now you know what to do next.
Mhm.
And so that's why I say like everyone should reach out. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not promising that we can take every single case from a civil standpoint and help get some kind of, compensation in the civil world, but what we can do is answer questions and provide information and help, in certain circumstances. So
Yeah.
um
I'm so glad you said that. As an advocate who has spent many years helping people get orders of protection, we don't think of that. We always think of that as like a safety planning tool, but there is an
yeah.
element of justice and sometimes even having your say in court with an order of protection. And so I love that there's all these different options, like you've mentioned before, that can give that sense of accountability and justice for survivors.
Yeah. Yeah, an order protect like the order protection system can be scary too.
Yeah.
And so knowing that there's a group like, we do those cases for free. There's also groups in certain areas of the state that represent domestic violence victims and sexual violence victims for free on order protection dockets. And so, the way I kind of phrase, I'm like, imagine walking into a hospital and trying to tell the doctor how to perform the surgery on you. You know, like, Jesus Christ, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
I
Like,
know. Thank you.
one semester of pre-med, I failed out of that. So
Yeah.
that ain't gonna work. Um, so that's what that fear can feel like. You walk in, you're like, Jesus Christ, this judge is up here and I don't know what the hell's going on. I have to face my abuser. Maybe the abuser has a lawyer. Like, oh my God, it's terrifying. And so just providing that kind of support, I think, is so incredibly important.
Mhm.
It's such a big part. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing just the civil side, right? Like the side where we're getting people money. Like, to me, it's like, that's just chasing money.
Mhm.
If you're serious about this work and you're passionate about this work and you're genuine, you need to be helping on is all the facets that you can. And it doesn't matter if there's money in it or not. And so that's a side that you have to be willing to do, in my opinion. Um, and it's an important one, because that's, again, it's helping people that deserve help and need it. And it's just, to simplify it, it's the right damn thing to do.
I could not agree more. So you've been doing this work for many years now, and I'm sure as you reflect over those years, certain survivors' words come to mind. What kind of feedback have you gotten from the clients that you've represented over the years?
Oh man. Um, yeah, I'm gonna start crying. Um, there was the first two cases, that's always kind of like stuck with me a little bit. Um, that's because I think they just were so hopeless. And because they had been through, they just hadn't had, no one was fighting for them. They felt like, and no one could help, they felt like. So we jumped into that case, and that was when I was doing this by myself, and I was a brand new lawyer, and we're up against this. All of a sudden, I get a call on my cell phone from this huge firm, and like it's person X, Y, and Z law firm. Person X calls me, and I'm like, hold on, I'm pulling in the parking garage. Let me call you right back. So the first thing I do, run up Google for the person, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this law firm's huge. I better act like I know what I'm doing here and sound like it. And so, and that, that case, they were like, well, what do you think here? I'm like, I think you need to pay this victim $1.3 million, like the limits of the insurance policy. Like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, here's the deal. And I will like never forget exactly where I was sitting in this like little tiny office I had, being like, you don't do it, I'm going to take your client's bank accounts, their cars, their jewelry, you name it. I'm not going to stop until I have it for this girl. And I slammed the phone down. And I'm like, you have until 5 p.m. on I forget what day. Boom. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? And
That's
so I
impressive.
went into my boss office. I'm like, I just went off on this guy. I have to call him back and tell him I'm not a total jerk. He's like, don't call him back. It's done. Don't call him back. And so sure enough, I think it was like some movie, like at 4:58 p.m. on the deadline, we get a call saying they're going to do it. And then eventually, had a very similar conversation about the second client. And then exact same result, right? At one point, the maximum under the insurance policy. And so those families came forward, and they had the girls were in the same youth group, and they had made this bracelet that said "fearless" on it. They said, hey, we told them, we kept them shielded from what was going on because we didn't want to force them to relive it unless they absolutely had to, but we told them what you did. And you're their hero, and they think you're fearless. And so that was a big one that really like kind of became a mantra of the career. It's like, I think it's on in our firm logo, or one of the versions of our firm logo is insistent on it.
Oh, brand. That's
And
wonderful.
so, yeah, and there's like, so behind, you can see like there's a couple things on that bookcase behind me that are from, that have ties to cases, or like are from clients, or have notes on it. Like the KISS autograph was a case that was just, really a horrific, sad case. And has a note, it was a kid who was killed, in an act of violence. And, I got, they were huge. Him and his dad had this huge bond over KISS. Um, and they, after the case was that we fought for a long time, really hard, and finally got a really good result for all things considered, like, right. But, and they, there's just a real like heartfelt note on it. And, we've had, there are a lot of clients who've done that. I think it's just that, even ones where I feel like I'm like, I don't know that, I didn't get you what I was hoping to get you. They've kind of just been like, we just feel like our life has changed, and there's finally good again.
Mhm.
And that, I think that's the part that like really gets you,
Uh, you're going to make me cry now. Thank you for
so
sharing those. Those are really,
no,
really
yeah,
excellent stories. So thank you. It just makes me really respect the work that you do. Um, you spoke to this very comprehensive approach you take to representing your clients in terms of providing options and even considering the different types of cases that you all take within your practice. And it seems to me that you also um, have that very comprehensive approach to the work that you do in the community. Yes, you're working professionally to make the world a better place, but you're also very involved in community-based efforts. Can you speak to what some of those efforts are and why that's important to you?
yeah. So, if I can, kind of search what I think you're asking about, is kind of some of the involvement we have with community organizations, but also with legislature.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, one of the big, from the community organization standpoint, it was realizing that there was these organizations that were doing so much and wanting to do so much more, um, to help sexual violence victims, domestic violence victims, or families of child abuse victims, and the child abuse victims themselves. And so to me, it was like, well, this goes hand in hand with what we're doing. How ridiculous would it be if I'm out here doing all this work we're serving the same people, but I'm not supporting them. Like, they're supporting me by helping these people feel comfortable enough talking about these things to where they might come to me, or that they'll talk, vice versa. So why are we not supporting each other? Why are we not supporting them? And so I think it got to be like that. Those are the types of organizations that change communities. And that's where that came from. With the legislature stuff, that was Missouri, in my opinion, is really behind the times and behind the curve on a lot of their laws dealing with child sexual abuse, sexual violence, domestic violence. And so it was like, okay, like I can just sit here and complain about it and accept it. Or when given the opportunity, I can go, do something about it and talk about it and maybe approach it like in a bit of an unexpected way. And so that was really what kind of prompted is like, for as long as I can remember and seem to have studied up on, they've been hearing from attorneys that do what I do with the, hey, we should change this. We should change this. We should change this. And it hasn't changed much. It's certainly, we've made progress. But if I could go to them and say, hey, this is what I do, but this isn't business to me. This is personal. And, it's not some attorney trying to line their pockets. This is, I'm here because I went through some of this, and that's why it's important to me. I think the last time I was in front of the legislature, I said, listen, these law change proposals are great, but honestly, they're not strong enough. Mm-hmm. And like, I would much rather you guys make these laws so strong with such sharp teeth that I'm out of business. Like, I don't want to do another case. Like, trust me, like, these cases all rip us to pieces. Like, it pales in comparison to what happened to the victims, and their families. But it's not like I get enjoyment out of fulfillment out of helping, getting a result, mm-hmm. but it's tough stuff to deal with every day. So I would much rather you guys make the law so damn strong that it finally stops this stuff, and I have to go, back to fixing traffic tickets or whatever the hell I'm doing. I don't know, find some other career, because I just don't want to. So I think coming with that approach that there's not this selfishness to it from a was important to me, because then it makes it a little more like, oh shit, there's something else here, and there's another reason why we should be paying attention to these people that are fighting this fight. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I think a little bit of is putting your money where your mouth is type stuff, but also if you got the knowledge and the voice, you should be using it.
Well, adding on to that a little bit, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and this year is actually the 25th anniversary of having a Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so I was just wondering, in recognition of having this awareness month over the last 25 years, is there anything that stands out to you as something really important about having an awareness month, or about just increasing awareness of sexual violence in general?
I think it's kind of one of the same things that we talked about previously, which is solidarity, knowledge and solidarity. That, it's, with all the months we have, it's like, why do we have them? Like, shouldn't this all just be givens? Yeah. And so Women's Rights Month, African-American Rights Month, all of it, why are we really so regressive as a society that we don't acknowledge these things should be just the norm, and that we should all be respecting and honoring these things all the time? But that's unfortunately not where we're at with a lot of things. But, with such a horrific thing that people feel still like they need to keep to themselves, or that they need to keep, something that happened to a family member, they all have to keep it within the four walls of their home or family dynamic. Bringing it to light that, hey, we, whether you're a survivor, whether you help survivors, whether you're a member of the community that holds abusers accountable, or you're just someone that wants to be supportive, getting it to the forefront of the conversation is important, because it reminds everyone that you don't have to feel alone. You don't have to feel scared. You don't have to feel ashamed, and you don't have to feel guilty. If anything, you should feel like you're part of a team here. And we're all that, I think, is the biggest, there's an entire team behind every single sexual violence and domestic violence victim. And we may not remember it all the time. We may not feel it all the time, but part of the reason for this month is if you didn't know it yet, you're going to know it now. And so that I think is why it's so important.
I love that idea of a team standing behind a survivor. And you're so right. For every person that causes harm, for every perpetrator of violence, there are a plethora of people saying, no, this is not okay. This must stop. So I love that point. And I love all of the points that you have made throughout our conversation today, Grant. I had a lot of respect for your work before we started talking, and now that has just grown and grown and grown. So I just want to thank you so much for all of the just really important points you made about your work and about the anti-violence movement in general. As we're wrapping up, do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to be sure to speak to today?
No, I just really wanted to appreciate the honor of even being invited to be a part of this. And your organization is, I know you talked about what I do, but it's pales in comparison to what you guys are doing and all the efforts you're putting forth. I get to help a small amount of people that have been had horrible things happen to them. But you guys are really, really fighting, statewide and helping change things beyond that. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm in awe of what you guys are doing, and I just want to thank you. So,
well, we're in this together, Grant, and I'm so glad we are. So thank you for all of your work. Thank you for this conversation today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We hope you join us next month for a new episode of Momentum for Change, Voices of the Missouri Movement. Thank you for joining us. This has been a recorded conversation now available in both video and podcast formats. A video recording of this episode is available on the MOCADSV YouTube channel under the Momentum for Change playlist. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to receive new episodes in your YouTube feed. You can also find all of our Momentum for Change episodes available to stream on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. Momentum for Change is a podcast produced by MOCADSV with post-production support provided by Tim Stillings and promotion by Adrian Maddox. Again, I am your host, Nora Mosby, and we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next month.